All right, today we are diving into one of the most mind-boggling economic collapses in modern history, Germany's hyperinflation crisis of 1923. Seriously, this is the story of how a country's money became so completely worthless that people actually started using it as wallpaper. So let's break down exactly how this economic nightmare happened.
Just try to wrap your head around that for a second. A single egg for 80 million marks. A glass of beer? That'll be 150 million. And no, this wasn't some crazy hypothetical. This was the stone-cold reality for millions of Germans in 1923. So how on earth did a modern industrial nation get to this point? To really get it, we've got to rewind to the immediate aftermath of World War I.
So here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look at the initial trigger, the crisis in the Ruhr. Then, we'll see the government's terrible response with the money printers. After that, we'll watch the mark become worthless, understand the absolutely devastating human cost, and finally, we'll assess the long-term political damage.
So where does a story like this even begin? You might think it starts in a bank, or maybe a government building. But nope, it actually starts with an invasion. The very first domino to fall was the occupation of Germany's industrial heartland. Okay, so you've got to understand the backstory here. After World War I, the Treaty of Versailles saddled Germany with absolutely massive reparation payments to the winning countries. By 1922, they were already falling behind, and the German government basically said, look, we just can't afford to pay for the next 3 years. Well, the French and Belgians just didn't buy it. They thought Germany was trying to weasel its way out of the treaty, so in January 1923, they marched their troops straight into the Ruhr. Now, this was a catastrophic blow. The Ruhr was literally the engine room of the entire German economy, and just like that, it was under foreign military control. With its main source of income completely cut off, the German government had to do something. But the path they chose, well, it was meant to be a show of defiance, but it would end up plunging the country into an economic abyss.
So, the government's official strategy was something called passive resistance. Basically, they called on all the German workers in the Ruhr to just go on strike, to flat out refuse to work for the French and Belgian forces. The thinking was, if no one works, the occupation becomes useless and unprofitable for them.
The plan seemed simple enough. To get the workers to strike, the government promised it would keep paying their wages. But wait a minute, with all the factories in the Ruhr shut down, where was that money supposed to come from? Their solution was dangerously simple. Just print it. They literally fired up the printing presses to create billions of marks out of thin air.
And this is the moment where everything just goes completely off the rails. The government's solution of printing money quickly became a way bigger problem than the invasion itself, and it led to the total and utter collapse of the German currency. The effect was immediate and frankly insane. Look at these numbers. Back in 1919, $1 was worth about 9 marks. By the time of the invasion in January 1923, it was 18,000 marks. But just 10 months later, in November, one single US dollar was worth an unimaginable 4.2 trillion marks. The speed of the collapse is just hard to even comprehend. This decision kicked off a truly vicious cycle. Okay, so follow me here. The government prints tons of money to pay the striking workers. But the more money they pump into the economy, the less every single mark is actually worth. As people realize their money is losing value, shopkeepers start jacking up their prices. And how does the government respond to these higher prices? You guessed it. They print even more money, which just makes the whole spiral spin faster and faster. And the end result of this spiral, the currency was fundamentally broken. It had lost all meaning. People were literally getting paid with wheelbarrows full of cash that could barely buy a single loaf of bread. But this wasn't just some abstract economic theory playing out on a chart. This was a human catastrophe. It turned German society completely upside down and absolutely destroyed millions of ordinary people's lives. I mean, just imagine it. You're a respectable, hardworking person who has spent your entire life carefully saving for retirement. And then, in a matter of months, those savings are completely wiped out, worthless, reduced to absolutely nothing. This is what happened to millions of Germans, leading to poverty on a massive scale and this profound sense of betrayal by their own government.
And this crisis created this deeply unfair social divide. The biggest losers were the responsible people, the middle class, pensioners, anyone who had diligently saved their money. They were ruined. But, believe it or not, there were winners. If you had huge debts, you could suddenly pay them off with a handful of worthless cash. and some big-shot industrialists who had foreign money could swoop in and buy up struggling companies for next to nothing. This created so much anger and resentment.
So all of this economic chaos and social misery, you can bet it had profound political consequences. It dealt a major blow to Germany's young, fragile democracy, the Weimar Republic.
And here's the really crucial part. While the French invasion was the trigger, the hyperinflation itself was a self-inflicted wound. It was directly caused by the German government's decision to print money. And because of that, so many ordinary, moderate Germans lost all their faith in democracy and the Weimar Republic. They just saw it as incompetent and weak.
And you have to remember, this wasn't happening in a vacuum. Hyperinflation was just one of several massive crises hammering the young republic. You still had the bitterness over the fake stab in the back myth from the end of the war. You had incredible anger over the Treaty of Versailles and the Ruhr invasion. So when you pile hyperinflation on top of all that, you can really start to see how the foundations of the entire democratic system began to crack.
Which brings us to our final critical question for you to think about. Out of all the problems the Weimar Republic faced, did hyperinflation do the most long-term damage? Some historians argue that it absolutely did, because it destroyed the middle class, which is often the bedrock of a stable democracy, and it opened the door for political extremists. But what do you think? It's a huge question to ponder when you consider what came next in German history.